So,
Oh, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I hate to do this, but I've got two unavoidable phone calls that I'm waiting on.
okay, well, you
I've
just
got my
take
phone
them.
on, but I've raced straight out.
Yeah, no, thanks, Alan.
Are we finishing at 4:40?
No.
Have a good look at the...
There's another
There must be a second page missing, I think.
page to come.
Okay, so guys, we'll kick off in a minute, but before we do, I thought we had a really good session yesterday. We just need to refresh ourselves on the rules of engagement. This is a moment when the public have their say, and we did have a few, not looking at anyone in particular, a few comments from councillors. So if we can just keep it to questions and keep our comments to ourselves, because remember that it's only 10 minutes, it's not a lot of time.
Does that apply to the chair as well?
Yes. Well, absolutely.
Well, we hope to see the chair self-discipline himself then.
Absolutely. I'll be looking forward to you, telling me when I don't.
All right, I'll be your...
You can be my
I'll be your-
guardian angel,
I'll be your guardian angel.
It's conscience.
Your moral compass.
my moral compass. That'll be good.
Did
I do all right yesterday, Rick?
That's a fox in a hen house.
Yeah. Yeah, and actually, I've got to revert there. I'm going to discuss with my wife whether Rick Barker can be my moral compass. Okay, Fred, thank you very much. You were up first, and thanks for sitting through some of it yesterday. I don't know whether you got any leads from that, or...
Oh, yes.
You did? Oh, we're looking forward to your 10 minutes then, Fred.
I said that in the paper this morning, Rex, but I suspect you may not be after I finish. Right.
Oh, no. You can't say anything to me that somebody else hasn't already said, Fred. Much worse.
Well, thank you for those kind words.
So, Fred, you know the rules. You've got 10 minutes. If you want councillors to have any questions, make sure you can fit them into 10. And I think everyone around this table knows who you are already, so you probably don't have to go into that, but you can if you like. Introduce yourself.
Right.
You're on, mate.
Good morning, Rex and councillors. My name is Fred Robinson. I was born in Napier. I lived here for 21 years. Then I lived in Auckland for 25 years, where I spent nearly 9 years as an investigator for the government, and I returned to Napier in 1997. Rex, has every councillor read my written submission?
I would think so.
I have.
Oh, thank you so much. My written submission has explained why the Port of Napier is in debt to the tune of $86.6 million. Now, this document, congratulations on framing the debate so that the really important issues are not even part of it. It is said that those who do not learn the lessons of history are doomed to repeat them, and Hawke's Bay Regional Council is no exception. This council has a bit of a history of making mistakes and then attempting to cover over those with an even bigger mistake. For example, grossly over-allocating the water in the Tukituki River, apparently against your own staff's advice, and then proposing the Ruataniwha Water Storage Scheme to cover over that error. The Ruataniwha Water Storage Scheme was a bigger mistake. Now we have a situation created by a previous group of people sitting around this table, namely demanding excessive dividends from the Port of Napier for the past 2 decades. This was knowingly to the detriment of the port's development and debt repayment obligations. Today, you propose a bigger mistake to cover over that historic short-sighted greed, namely selling 49% of the port. When are you going to just front up for a change, acknowledge the excess of the past and put things right? You knew the debt situation with the port when you invested $50 million with the finance industry earlier this year. You stated in Facing Our Future, this thing back in earlier this year, that was in March. The future capital structure of Napier Port is not part of this consultation, but we anticipate bringing this to you in year 1 of our plan. The 24-page consultation document of that time stated, even with forecast growth, Napier Port cannot fund future development on its own without capital investment or dividend relief from council. So get the $50 million back, clear a big chunk of the port debt, and yes, a modest rate increase is going to be required. This council historically created the problem. You've inherited it. Now's the time to fix it, while retaining public ownership of an essential strategic asset for this province. This is my last submission to this council, either written or oral, and I have 4 reasons for that. The first reason is on the 27th of June this year, regional democracy became a tradable commodity, traded away for some cheaper borrowing from the local government funding agency. There is no point in convincing you of a particular course of action when you are no longer the ultimate decision maker of this local body. Reason number 2 has become blindingly obvious to me that most of you don't actually read my submission, so I'm very pleased by Councillor Hewitt and others who have this time, despite the assurances from various previous chairpersons that they have been read. I believe the consultation process is largely a farce. That's my belief. You can disagree. Reason number 3, Hawke's Bay Today. The media appear not to consider an $86.6 million rort of the ratepayers front page news. Neither, apparently, is you appointing the finance industry as overlord above this council. I acknowledge the decline and fall of local body coverage is a national problem, not just locally. And reason number 4, 99% of Hawke's Bay residents don't know the implications of what you've done this year, and the majority probably don't care. But they will once the finance industry puts the boot in. Just before I conclude this oral presentation, I would like to relate a short and a hopefully amusing story regarding Hawke's Bay regional consultation from my experience earlier this year. When it was announced in the media on Friday in March of this year that the 2018-28 long-term plan would be available on the following Monday, I thought that maybe Hawke's Bay Regional Council already had these discussion documents available, and so I came into the council offices and asked if I could obtain a copy. Your staff were very helpful, and after a phone call upstairs, I was asked to wait in the foyer area, which I did, because they were printing one off. Sitting in a chair watching the world go by, I observed a senior staff member arrive through the back entranceway. At almost the same time, a young woman arrived through the front doors. They met at approximately 1.5 metres in front of where I was sitting. Clearly, that staff member has a crystal ball in his office, because he proudly proclaimed that the 10-year plan was a done deal, and that, I quote, he had 6 councillors rock solid behind the plan, unquote. Shortly thereafter, a copy of the plan was delivered to me, and I left the building. I find it interesting that 4 days before the general public would get their hands on the printed version of a 10-year plan, and certainly well before the consultation had been undertaken, that it was considered a done deal. And as history has recorded, so it came to pass, with minor tweaking to the amount of funds pulled back from the tourism industry. I'm rather keen to get my hands on that crystal ball to find out the lotto numbers for the next draw. I'll now give you a short summary of my conclusions. Since 2008, Wall Street banks and elite multi-billionaires had arrived at a strategy to acquire primarily 2 things. Number 1, infrastructure assets, such as ports, airports, water, sewerage plants, renewable energy generation, to name a few. And 2, the world's fresh water supplies. Clearly, they are well on the way to acquiring Napier's port, thanks to the efforts of this council. This council have a history of making mistakes and attempting to cover them over, with even bigger mistakes. This appears to be a litany of mismanagement. Hawke's Bay Regional Council have suggested in the past they could obtain investment income from a partial or full sale of the Port of Napier. In my opinion, the Port of Napier should be transferred to an independent public body other than this council, charged with maintaining the port for the benefit of the people of Hawke's Bay and returning a dividend from that port operation to the stakeholders and people of Hawke's Bay as originally intended. I wish to address James Palmer's statement of Tuesday morning concerning dividend take from the Port of Napier, when he suggested a reduction in recent times of the dividend. Yes, that's true. I believe the dividend take has reduced from grossly excessive to simply excessive. I suggest a dividend between 30 and 40% of after-tax profit appears sustainable, and even that may have to be foregone if major capital works are required. There was a graph dished out to some people the other day showing retained earnings as issued by James Palmer yesterday, and it gives proof of the old adage, lies, damn lies, and statistics. I now provide you with a spreadsheet, which you have in front of you, showing that back in 2008, the Port of Napier effectively had more retained earnings than it does today when you deduct the current debt owed from the retained earnings figure for each year. Now, that's it. If you have any questions, feel free, and if you have any more questions after today, you can call me at home. But that was the spreadsheet that shows you that back in 2008, they had more in the kitty than they do today.
Thank you, Fred. We have time for one question. Paul.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Fred, you've pointed out that about the dividend. You think the dividend's been hugely excessive over the years.
I know the dividend.
Can you point out from have you made submissions to the long-term plan and the annual plan on that basis, pointing that out to us?
No, because I wasn't aware of that issue until I put a piece in the paper which had a response from a previous councillor around this table who told me of the day and the person who actually suggested you guys start taking more dividend than was prudent, and in fact from that time you did. So I didn't know of that information before then.
Okay, we don't have time for another question. Thanks, Fred. I knew you wouldn't be boring, mate. You did not disappoint.
Oh, please, thank you, Rex. Neither have you guys.
Thank you very
much. Statement.
Sorry, no, that was congratulations as the Speaker leaves. Keep me on key, though. Thank you very much, Fred. We appreciated your frankness. Bruno. I don't have to repeat all that, do I, Bruno? 10 minutes?
No, I've got that message.
And introduce yourself.
Good morning, councillors, Chairman Rex, Bruno Chambers, and I'm a local farmer. And as a farmer in this growing and vibrant region we live in, I'd like to make a few comments. I'll leave the more technical details to others that have greater expertise. I'm a fifth-generation Hawke's Bay farmer, and I'm privileged to be farming land that's been in the family for as long as the port has been in operation. So it comes as no surprise that I don't support selling land, and likewise I don't support selling the port or capital assets that are the lifeblood of this region. I'm old enough to remember, as most of you are, the government sale and the privatisation of assets under Roger Douglas, and the loss of value to Kiwis that resulted from the disposal of the Bank of New Zealand, New Zealand Railways, and a whole lot of others, and subsequently the telephone and electricity networks. The idea that these shares are to be sold and to be retained by Kiwi mums and dads is a fallacy. Institutional investors will snap them up pretty quickly, and then they're likely to end up in overseas ownership. This is what we've seen in the past, and I've no doubt it will happen again in the future. You can't control the future ownership of shares. Rex will remember well, I imagine, the showdown between the Apple and Pear Board and Turners and Growers in the 1990s. So I believe there needs to be a really good look at other funding operations. The most obvious is a levy on the value of the throughput of the current port users. It looks as if a 1% levy on value of the export-import trade would return approximately $50 million. It's clear that an historical 3% return on capital has been inadequate, and this needs to change. It will, under a revised ownership model, as new investors would not be drawn in with the prospect of return of this amount. The exporters will face increased charges regardless, and they could well be much greater if ownership were to be, if the ownership model is changed. You may say that this won't happen. However, most of you sitting around this table most of you won't be sitting around this table in 10 years' time. And new councillors and staff may well have a very different view on this issue. Rate increases is the other potential source of revenue. And as I've said before in this room, I'm happy to pay increased rates if I think they are being used in an orderly manner and well spent. And I believe retaining full ownership of the port is rates money well spent. I think it's misleading to compare Napier to Port to Tauranga. These are very different beasts, and Tauranga has much better linkages and other advantages, such as being the main exit point for Fonterra. I'd like to pose a couple of questions to the table for you to mull over. Is it true that the I'm not sure of the pronunciation, shipping are only going to export through 2 New Zealand ports, one in the North Island and one in the South Island? How do you factor in these unknowns that are coming up in the future? Do we really want to encourage cruise ships to Napier, bringing their dirty diesel to our shores and, from my knowledge, a very limited spend? I see that 500k has been equated to each per ship spend. I'm not sure how that's arrived at. My feeling is it's somewhat less than that, but then maybe it includes the diesel and the providoring of the boats, etc. Has the council really looked and resolved the operational and engineering challenges of a port expansion? By that I mean the resolution of access issues, limited land area, other environmental unknowns, re-dredging, and the deepening of the port. I'm also very concerned at the speed with which this decision is being sought, and I urge the council not to decide on this pre-Christmas. Likewise, I urge the council to seek expert advice on other non-sale options from people who are well qualified to offer this advice and who do not have a sale preference or a sale agenda. We do not want a repeat of the Rotanifa Dam scenario. You can only sell an asset once, and as the old adage goes, act in haste and repent at leisure. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruno. Questions? Tom?
Bruno, do you have some particular suggestions as to who those non-sale experts might be?
As to who the non-sale
Experts might be that we should...
No, but I mean, I'm sure they're out there, and I haven't got any, clue as to who they... Well, I have got the odd one, but, a couple of them have submitted already. I'm sure that there are people who could advise on this, but no, sorry, I can't answer that, Tom.
Debbie?
Bruno, we had a capital structure review committee which included independent people, Chris Tremaine, Jim Scotland being 2 of them, David Shand. I'm wondering if you might be suggesting that they are brought back in to have another look?
Well, I don't think they are the independent advisors that you should be seeking. I mean, they have already been involved in the process. I'm thinking of more, and I think they probably both have a sale agenda or a sale preference. I'm suggesting that you obtain expert advice from people who can really objectively and independently assess the economic options going forward.
Paul?
Thank you, Chair. Just furthering on this discussion, Bruno, I'm thinking more of like a deep down philosophical discussion as to why these, to assist us making the decision rather than one which is purely straight out almost an accounting decision or economic decision.
Well, I am suggesting throwing the net a lot wider, and some of that philosophical debate probably is appropriate. That, of course, will take a considerable amount of time, and but I'm more suggesting, a proper in-depth economic analysis of looking at options for not selling, and really trying to gauge, what are the possibilities out there. Look at it constructively and think, well, let's go into this looking at retaining the port in public ownership rather than, an easy option selling it off.
Another question?
Yes, Tom.
Yeah, Bruno, you do propose that one alternative is to include an extra levy on the current port users. Do you have either a first-hand sense or through colleagues like Mr. Bostock, do you have a sense that the users of the port are actually able to swallow a bigger levy for use of the service?
I wouldn't like to generalise. I think, and I don't know John's opinion on this, but I have read a few of the submissions from exporters who are again selling the port. Likewise, I've only skimmed them, but there's some to the contrary. So it's a little bit hard to get a gauge on, what the exporters really feel. I think, again, I'm a little bit disappointed in the speed of this submission process and the lack of sort of information seeking submissions, and I don't feel as a ratepayer I received proper notification through the mail. I think somebody said yesterday that they always get their bills, but they they didn't get a lot of info on the port sale.
Rick.
It's a thought that in actual fact we are looking at this issue from the wrong direction. The issue isn't just about the port, it's about the capability of the regional council. So we've got climate change and global warming and all those other things on the horizon. This council needs to be in a position to attend to all of those issues, have money, invest and do things. So would you think it's an acceptable compromise to take the regional council resources and capability invested in extending the port, or to attending to the necessary issues coming over the horizon from global warming?
Well, certainly I think the council's got a responsibility to do both. It's various environmental challenges facing you are considerable. Again, I reiterate that I support the idea of increased rates if that's money well spent, and I consider both these potential expenses coming forward are responsibilities of the regional council and should be borne to some extent by both the ratepayers and the people using the port.
Thank you. No, sorry, Debbie. We're out of 10 minutes.
Okay.
Thanks, Bruno. You kept it really well under the 5, so you allowed a lot of questions, which was really good. So really appreciate the fact you've thought deeply about this.
Thank you, Chairman.
And take it on board. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bruno.
Bridget.
Yes.
You've just walked in the door and we're grabbing you.
I'm so sorry.
No, we apologise. We're probably a little bit ahead of time.
I forgot where the entrance to the building was, so I'm so sorry. I don't even know. Gosh, I don't even know what the procedure is because I haven't done this before.
I'm going to tell you, Bridget. First of all, they look a bit ominous, this lot, but they're not. They're really can be a nice bunch at times, and so we're hoping they will be for you. So you've got 10 minutes, and within the 10 minutes, you calculate to get questions from the councillors as well.
Wow.
So you've only got 10 minutes to do the whole thing, and we have to be quite strict because
That's okay.
in fairness to everybody else.
That's
It's a
okay.
really good idea if you start off and tell councillors who you are
Okay.
and how you fit into the picture in Hawke's Bay.
Fine.
Okay?
Right.
Floor is yours.
I haven't got any paper to distribute, first of all. Okay, my name is Bridget Dunn. I have been living in New Zealand for the last 14 years. My husband and I and our 3 children immigrated from London. We mainly came to New Zealand for a better way of life, for a quality of life. My husband instigated that, wanting to bring his children up in a place that was just more space and just a greater quality of life for us as a family and opportunities and things like that. We used to live out in Puketapu. We had lived in a lifestyle block for 9 years, and then we built our home on Napier Hill just 4.5 years ago. I only became interested in this topic when I read, I think it was Robin Gwen's editorial in the paper. I've just become sort of newly wanting to be engaged in life. I'm just a regular person. Brought my children up here. 2 children are already left home away. My youngest child's about to go off to university. But I just really wanted to engage in the process. And I think it's important that everyone is involved in this decision. And I've read different editorials and got myself up to speed the last week or so. But and I've just got a few thoughts put together. That's all. I haven't got any agenda. I just wanted to, see the people and who are making this decision. It's not an easy one, and just to say a few words. That's all. So I've got it typed out. So I'm not here to press any particular option. I can see the merits of all the different options that are open to you. I'm just mainly here to just to make sure that when you do decide, that it's going to be that you feel comfortable in your own conscience and your own minds that you've done everything you can to make sure the people of Hawke's Bay have been considered, and not just certain elements of the community. So I'll just start off by thanking you, as for you to be willing to serve as councillors. I know it's, people may think, oh, you're very privileged and all the rest of it, but I know it's not easy, to do what you do. And I'm sure you're aware of that, all the responsibility that goes along with all the decisions you make, not just this one, but obviously we're here to talk about the port. But again, I think there's a duty and obligation to serve the best interests of all the ratepayers, but you are compelled to make decisions that are commercially viable at the same time. And I'm sure, like you all, like we do, want to see our community thrive and attract new people and businesses. And of course, one of the ways we can only do this is through outside investment. I just learned just very recently about our port, or out from Hawke's Bay, that we only have 2 freight trains a week. I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, that go out of Hawke's Bay, out of the region. They go to Wellington and then on to the South Island. I'm just amazed that that's all it is, that we're not doing more than that. And with regard to this decision about the port, I know the way we can fund it is through increase our rates for ratepayers, but again, I'm sure you all know that the vast majority of people in our community, they don't look like us, and they probably don't even know this is happening today. They're probably not interested, or they've got other things on their mind. Providing for their families and seeing how they can ends meet, and thinking of Christmas and how they're going to look after their family with Christmas coming up. I heard about what my fellow submitter John Thompson talked about yesterday, and I would just urge you to think about that again, how we can fund this through initiatives like the Provincial Growth Fund, so that we can retain ownership of the port, within our region. I know you've already tried that, and but maybe to see if we can do something else, so that we can say this port will belong to the people. And I know it's a very hard decision to make. I don't envy you, and it's just all about considering other ideas and opinions different to our own. That there's always 2 sides to an argument, and just to look at this as a positive thing. It's not just it's us against them or anything like that. We're all in this together. It's a decision that we collectively make as a community, and to see it like that, it's not a question of whatever decision is made. There's going to be people who are up against it and everything. So I just summarise by just saying, follow your conscience. Don't just choose the easy option, and no matter what option is chosen, I'm sure only time will tell if it was the right one. And even if it's not the right one, that you'll be willing to say, okay, that was wrong, whatever, let's reconsider it again. But just don't try and, cover anything up or justify anything. Just really be open and honest and transparent. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget. We really appreciate that. Councillors, any questions?
Question,
Yes, Ray.
could I make a statement?
Yes.
I just thought it was a fabulous presentation, and I want to say to you, everybody around this table takes this matter very seriously.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thanks, Rick. That was a good statement. Okay, thank you, Bridget. So,
All right.
clearly the councillors enjoyed your submission. Thank you very much. Peter Alexander. Thank you, Peter. I will say you've got 10 minutes, and if you want councillors to answer questions, you need to do it in the 10 minutes. And it's really good if you can introduce yourself and tell councillors how you fit into the Hawke's Bay scene.
Okay, my time starts now.
Yeah, I can give you a bit of extra, but hand is heading towards the button.
Okay.
Off you go.
All right. Thank you for entertaining my presence here. Appreciate the opportunity. My compliment goes wider afield, and I'm really appreciating the professionalism, which is, I think, fairly recent in Hawke's Bay. Let's put a frame on it from my point of view, about the last 2 or 3 years. I've been a business advisor for this region, and in that realm as well, I can see some maturity going on. So it's most welcome. I'm seeing far, far less political battle and far more concentration going towards the pragmatic vein. So I really appreciate it. My background, so just to backtrack, I am Peter Alexander. I'm not Peter Alexander, Chantel's owner, who is quite frequently confused with me. So we're quite different animals. I've come down a business route which has involved me in CEO roles, GM roles, business advisor, building governance structures, etc. I think it's really important that I give a broader context to who I am. I've had family here for the last 90 years. So my grandmother was the first, she's Dorothy Lucas, she was the first female deputy mayor in Hawke's Bay. She was deputy mayor in Taradale. She's still alive, she's still with us, she's 97, she's in Somerset, still very switched on. She was also one of the first women through the London School of Economics in the world. So on my father's side, my dad's parents owned the Four Square shop in Clive for a period. Jenkins Jewellers, that was owned by my great-grandmother, Kathy Jenkins. My great-grandfather was Matt Alexander. He was a physics teacher at Napier Boys High School and around the earthquake era. My mum was the DP at Puketapu for about a decade. My brother designed the Puketapu school logo, which it still is. And my uncle is Peter Lucas. Although he's retired, he was the GM for Heinz Watties, which was then Watties Frozen Foods in Hastings, and turned that business around quite markedly in that time.
Known well to me.
So that's 90 years. So when I speak today, I'm speaking on behalf of my greater family, I believe. We know Hawke's Bay thoroughly, as all of us here should do. I'm delighted that we are looking at a growth opportunity for the Napier Port. What I was trying to push as a business advisor in this region is stop being so parochial. I am quite direct, and I'm purposely like that. I lecture now in commerce at EIT, and I make no bones about that. We need to be more forceful in our conduct and the decisions that we make. We need to look at opportunity for growth. We can see what's going on in the primary industries around Hawke's Bay in terms of apple growing, at least. And we need to provide for that. Our choices don't include, in my view, backpedaling or staying as the status quo. We need to challenge that status quo and grow. So the idea of enlarging the port infrastructure sits very well with me. I do have a presentation. I'm not sure where that's got to within the realms here, but there is a PowerPoint presentation that talks about capitalisation. So there's some specifics that I'd like to introduce if we can. Do we have a clicker?
No, we don't. Just you can either arrow down on the keyboard or
Can't afford one of those.
just click down on the
We haven't been gouging enough profits.
Now, Peter, you need to keep going here because
Where is the machine that's...
Yeah, behind you.
Sorry. Okay, I'll just use a keyboard.
Might be easier. Or down, I think. Yep, there you go.
Okay. So I'm going to screen through this. I'll try and do this. It is? Okay.
Does he get a bonus minute for all this? I move 2 minutes.
I'll do my best to work within the time constraint. So, look, I've been involved in business mergers, so I know what it takes to build scale, and I don't believe that we've got the capability within our population base in Hawke's Bay or the demographic right to fund it within current means. So I am a proponent for looking at a capitalisation that looks at New Zealand Stock Exchange involvement. Now, where that split lies relative to local stakeholdership, that's up for debate. I've got some advocacy around that, which you'll see in the PowerPoint, and we'll just move through that. I'm suggesting that 24% feels roundabout right, based on where I've been in business before with merging entities, and I can talk about rationale for that as we go through. So, the wisdom behind the New Zealand Stock Exchange being involved, the governance and operational management of the Stock Exchange means that the board that's involved in looking after the interests at a governance level for Napier Port is very much going to be required to jump through certain hoops that are commonplace for all New Zealand Stock Exchange businesses. The regulated framework would assist in the appointed board of directors making well-reasoned research decisions, and I think it would also help stopping resuming or resorting, looking at a parochial mindset and working from what we have now. I think it'll force us to keep looking bigger and wider afield. And I've just talked about accountability side of things there at the bottom. The New Zealand Stock Exchange represents a commendable capitalised growth option, because what it means is that we've got a more or less an infinite shareholder base that we can reach out to. So people that may not be in the mix to start with as shareholders could be drawn into it as they can see what the performance of the port is listed on the New Zealand Stock Exchange. So rather than look at a finite population of Hawke's Bay, we're looking at a potentially infinite population, which is not just New Zealanders, but probably wider afield than that as well. So I'm saying here as a suggestion, 51% current stakeholders, 24% New Zealand shareholders, or New Zealand Stock Exchange shareholders, and then Unison Trust. So the consumer's side of the Unison operation. Now, I can't give you figures around what the current number of shareholders is for Unison, but I would imagine that it's in the tens of thousands, if not tipping over 100,000. Someone could probably inject with that statistic. What I am suggesting is it gives us a really good reach for distributing the benefit in terms of return on investment out of the port to as many people in Hawke's Bay as possible. So the recommendation for 76% of total shareholder equity to be retained, split between 51% current shareholders and then 25% Unison Trust shareholders. So given the scale and the prominence and visibility of the port over and above its importance to our region, so the physical presence of the port, we've got to remember that in the equation as well. The Hawke's Bay community feels an emotional attachment to that infrastructure. A lot of us see it in the weekend if we go up to the top of Napier Hill and we look down. We feel that that's a part of who we are. It's a part of our identity as a community. Okay, so we've got to think about that. That's intrinsic ownership. I'm just going to skip the next bullet point. I'm not going to read everything here. I'm sure we can all read at a fairly rapid pace. I think we need to preserve that innate sense of attachment, and that should be a part of the equation. So when we look at the Unison idea, or factoring in Unison, a large number of Hawke's Bay shareholders are involved, so the benefit can be dispersed. We've talked about that. It makes good commercial sense to use the dredged tailings when we come to look at the actual operation of how we enlarge the port. So, look, I come from a surfing background, and I do have an interest in seeing what happens with those tailings. And I've seen some dialogue around, well, we simply take them offshore and we dump them on Pania Reef or thereabouts. So I'm saying, look, we can be smarter than that, and it's a whole part of that equation of being smarter overall. You know, breaking the cycle, changing the way we think, constantly challenging how we do things and asking why we do things. So I'm saying we've got a great opportunity here, guys, to say, why don't we include Napier, or Hawke's Bay as a whole, on the professional surfing circuit? And I know I'm running out of time. So if we took 1 minute. So if we
will extend it for another minute because you did get all that hiccup. So
right.
you got
1 minute extra. Okay.
You got 1:30, 1.5 minutes.
1.5 minutes. That's good. What I'm going to suggest is that we need to, at the time of the engineering implementation, is think about not dumping it out at sea, but constructing an asset as a byproduct within Hawke's Bay, which is the semi-artificial construction of Harding Road, which is actually a point break for those who know about surfing, and also Perfume Point. Now, there's some technical attributes of that idea, including probably slowing down wave energy before it hits West Shore Beach. So it could be viewed from a pragmatic point of view, not a sporting point of view, as helping minimise or reduce the rate of erosion through the West Shore Reach. So I just want you to think about that. So it's not just about what we end up with a port infrastructure, it's what we could end up with on top of having enlarged and improved looking Napier Port. We can have a whole new infrastructure that pulls in more people into Hawke's Bay, tourism dollar increases, and that thereby it increases the return on the overall investment that we're looking at the moment. So. Yeah, and look, my parting comments are, I think we need to ensure that the major stakeholding remains in favour of local people for the reasons that I've outlined in the presentation. We need to ensure that the preferences of the majority of local people are those that are going to determine what the governance decisions are in the board.
Thank you, Peter. I'm afraid we have to stop.
Okay.
We did give you an extra minute because of the messing around. But
you did. In
fairness to everyone else, we've just got to keep to our timetable.
So thanks for your
Well, thank you, Peter.
attention.
You've clearly done a lot of thinking about this, and we really appreciate your thoughts.
Thoughtful.
Thank you. John? Welcome, John.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So, John, you know the rules. We have 10 minutes. If you want councillors to ask any questions, you have to fill it in that within the 10 minutes.
Yes, of course.
And it's a really good idea if you tell councillors, although many will know who you are, and where you fit in.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity to speak, Mr. Chairman. So I'm John Palairet, Chartered Accountant, more latterly, I suppose, Company Director. I've had a long governance relationship with Unison, still remaining on the Unison Insurance Board. I was Chairman of the airport for a number of years. I'm currently Chair of the Audit and Risk Committee for the Napier City Council. So, Mr. Chairman, I come here in support of your preferred option, which I believe satisfies the port's funding needs to enable growth, achieves diversification of investment as far as the council is concerned, provides for a stable minority shareholding base, and has no rate impact, so I think it's a standout option for you. The other options, I believe, do have some significant disadvantages. The borrowing option from the local government funding agency may be look okay so far as it goes, but I think the difficulty is it imposes problems with your own balance sheet. I think it leaves you with little headroom for future borrowing, particularly in the case of adverse events, and in times of significant climate change, we have to be aware that that could occur. For example, your flood control assets could be compromised, requiring the council to borrow and invest more money. And also in the case of a catastrophic earthquake, earthquake insurance currently will not necessarily provide full replacement for assets that are are affected by earthquakes. Most infrastructure companies and indeed councils insure on a maximum maximum probable loss basis, which does not cover necessarily all of the losses. So again, I think it's important that you as a local authority retain good headroom in your balance sheet. So therefore, I don't favour that option at all. Option C, which is the sale to investment partners, is all right as far as it goes, but I think that it can have disadvantages down the track. You may end up with a partner who is compatible initially, but if, as is typically the case, an investment partner would seek to sell out after, say, 5 or 10 years, the council's not in a position to exercise its preemptive rights to purchase. So you may be landed with another shareholder who may not be so compatible, and could lead to difficulties at boardroom level with disagreements on strategy. So I think that the stable minority base that you're proposing with the 45 to 49% option is much to be preferred. The long-term operating lease, I think I just entirely agree with your own position on that, which is that its retention of control and commitment to regional values overrides that option. It's effectively a quasi-sale. In fact, if an overseas lessee was involved, it would, I believe, be subject to Overseas Investment Office approval, which may not be forthcoming in view of the fact it's a strategic asset. But aside from that, I think it's losing control for that period of time is just completely undesirable. If you were to choose to not renew the lease, the state in which the assets are left to you at the end of that period could be questionable. So it's simply not a goer in my opinion. So I think that you've correctly identified the preferred option. You may choose to just float initially 45%. That'll depend on what the book build price comes out at, of course. So that'll be a matter of finding out. But I also want to commend you on the process. I believe it's been extremely rigorous. There's been some comment about the need to have a referendum. This is not a decision which should be taken by referendum. This is a very rigorous process commencing with the Capital Structure Review Panel, which you set up in March or April 2017. That comprised representatives from this council, port representatives, and independent members, and I believe provided a very good base on which to then commence your own consideration of these issues over what is probably an 18-month or 2-year period. During that time, I expect that you've been subjected to numerous presentations and workshops. So I think you as councillors are in a very good position to make that decision. And I think the whole process, I believe, has been subject to much public comment, a lot of public participation. I believe a record number of submissions for you as a council on any consultation that you've run. So I think that the public can say that they have had the opportunity to participate and that this has been the right sort of process. So, Mr. Chairman, that's pretty much all I had to say. This is an extremely important decision for the Hawke's Bay region, and I strongly support the preferred option that you have before you.
Thank you, John. I'll start with Debbie, and then we'll come around.
Thank you, John. Good morning.
Ben, you had your hand up.
I'm interested in your comments on the Future Investment Fund, and we have 50 million, as you're aware, sitting in there at the moment. So this fund will potentially be up to 130 million with a ring fence provision that is only as safe as each annual plan, so 1 year, and then politicians can change it. What are your thoughts on that amount of money in an investment fund that can be tapped into by future politicians?
So is your question in relation to the use of that fund for an investment in the port?
The need for us to be attracting that amount of money in a cash flow, in a cash account.
Well, it's a business case issue, isn't it, I suppose? So what you're saying is what do I think about the council having access to that fund for use in some diversified investment? Well, I think that's all right as far as it goes. It depends on the merits of the particular case that you invest. Is it part of your mandate is regional growth, isn't it? I guess. So is that where you see that investment would be directed?
We need to move on from the question on site.
Sorry.
Swinton?
Just, thank you, Chair, very quickly. We've had a view from a previous trustee of Unison, and now we've got you here, which is great. There's been a train of thought that Unison should just pony up and buy a local share. I've been shaking my head at that. Can you confirm that that would not be possible under a range of acts, etc.?
I sit here today as not a member of the main Unison board anymore, so I just speak as a private citizen on that and give my observations. Happy to do so. Unison's had a history of investing in complementary businesses, such as ETEL, the transformer manufacturing business, the fibre network, such as its contracting company, which I've just retired from that board, that has substantial work in Dunedin. So I think it's unlikely. So it invests in those businesses because the board and management can bring their expertise to the running of those businesses. It is, as I say, complementary. Aside from the stretch on the balance sheet, which I think would be significant for Unison, I think it's very unlikely they would be interested in investing in a company which they know little about, a business in which they know little about. It's not a complementary business, so I don't see that as likely to happen.
Thank you.
Neil?
John, thank you. Thank you for submission. Just a question in regard to comments made around the dividend that has accrued to the Hawke's Bay Regional Council over the last 1-2 decades. On average, a 60% dividend on profit or 40% retained profit for investment in the port. What is your comment on that level of dividend that regional councils enjoyed over that period of time?
So it's a 40%, 60% retention by the port, 40% dividend. Yeah, which would be typical, I think, of infrastructure companies, for example. The Unison dividend this year, I think, was $12.5 million, although their profit, that's tax paid, so higher than that. So that's roughly 40%, I think, 35-40%. Yeah.
In the scheme of things, it's you wouldn't describe it as a gouging exercise.
Not at all. No.
Quick question, Peter.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you for your submission.
Got a minute, so don't
John, your statement preference is B. Do you have a view on the retention of shares or a large chunk of the shares by Hawke's Bay people?
Oh, I think we have to just see what happens, of course, and I don't know what the rules are around that. I think it's desirable for Hawke's Bay people to invest, and it's likely, I think, that they would. If you have a local shareholding base, I think that's good. So
Thank you, John. That was really excellent. And you can tell you inspired a lot of questions. Thank you very much for taking time out of your day to do that for us.
Thank you, John.
Geoff Harman. Don't get much time to think around here, Geoff. You've got to... Up here.
Bill goes more 10 seconds the bloody ejector seat goes.
Oh, I suppose I'm going to hand these around, are I?
Yeah, no, just hand it around and they'll pass it around. Now, Geoff, you've got 10 minutes and...
I know that, yes.
Yeah, and if you want to fit the councillors in, you can take the whole time if you like. The other thing is that's really good if you let councillors know who you are and how you fit into Hawke's Bay. So, tell me where you want me to press the button.
Geoff Harman. How do I fit in Hawke's Bay? I've lived here for quite a few years, been a business and done this and that, and still breathing. And with the port, I wasn't that interested, but then I got interested, and the more I looked, the more interesting it got. So, I'm here. And do I start now? Why not? Yes, well, the port in Napier, exporters and importers need quick and cost-effective shipping. The risk of investing large amount needs to be spread. An IPO, initial public offering, would seem to be the best way to achieve this. And just before I came, I was in the shower and I sort of had a look at the companies. And I knew a guy years ago that had had shares in the port. Now, did they buy all those back? Did they?
I don't know.
You don't know, because I see you supposedly 100% owned by, but yeah, I just thought I'd bring that up.
Oh, yeah, some other people did own shares,
Yeah.
and we bought them out.
You bought them back, a bit like Auckland, yeah. Right, now, the shipping companies have been through a pretty challenging few years. And, you know, they've had bankruptcies, mergers and alliance, along with scrapping. They've all been in the mix. The new mega ships that have been built seem to be around 390 to 399 metres long, and they don't seem to go over 60 in width. 58 is about the maximum. And of course, they've got a draft. And they will never come here, you know, because I read in the Hawke's Bay today that the chairman of the Hawke's Bay Regional Council, I think his name was Rex Graham, wrote that Napier would never be a deep water port. But then you get on the net and it describes it in places as a deep water port. So when you're looking at all this, you know, it's like the net. The building of megaships is slowing. And what seems to be the case now is they're going for ships 8 to 10,000 TEUs. You know what they all stand for. You should do. You. And and they are generally over 300 metres long and around 40 metres in breadth. So I don't know whether your new port's going to be handle those because. January 2020, the shipping companies have to reduce their sulphur emissions. That's it. They bought it in themselves. That's written in stone. And so what's happening is they are, to start off with, when that came out, it didn't come out that long ago. It was within the last 2 years because they had up till 2025, but they chose January 2020. And there was, straight away, they said, well, I'll never make it. But it seems like they're all putting in for scrubbers. And there's a new scrubber, well, it's not that new, but well, they always used to be vertical, now they could be horizontal. So they don't take up too much deck space that way. But with the wash water, that is, I just see Singapore's come out and they've banned ships disposing of wash water in their waters because it's highly toxic. So it's not coming out the funnel anymore, but it's chances are it's going to go down into the sea. Now, with the global warming thing, you know, that's going to come under scrutiny. And I just see a cruise ship, you know, there's a couple of cruise ships that have been built that are on gas. If you build, gas takes up 3 more times the space of the fuel that they use now, well, they have been using, the heavy, inky stuff. So the latest box ships, that's what they call them in America, container ships, mostly diesel, but have the ability to go to gas if they need to. It's far more expensive, but at the moment they're scrubbers. If it takes a long time to fit a scrubber and it has to have sea trials, and you know, so there's going to be a shortage of ships for a while. There's been an oversupply. But then the way the governments are going, you know, they are going to bring in legislation where you know, those ships won't be able to come. There's a lot of countries where they just will not come. Now, from what I can gather, Napier's like a feeder port. You're never going to get the big ships here. I don't know what you can handle at the moment. You've got Tauranga, and if you read their annual return, it's pretty impressive. What have they had? A 22.4% annualised return since 1992. So that's to the shareholder. Now, I don't know whether you guys can compete with that. And their tonnage is way above Napier. Napier's just about 172. They're way up there, 700 or something. So increasingly, ships make money while they're at sea, and they come to port and it costs money. So the bunkerings will probably come down to not more than 2. And because it's going to be pretty competitive out there, and you know, that's what I'm getting at really here is no one seems, in all the articles I've read, no one's really coming across from the shipping angle. And they have had their problems, and they've still got them, and I'll have them for a while longer. But it's all about making money, and they will want to come, and they'll have probably 2 bunkerings, and that's it, and they'll be gone. So the big ports will get probably, you know, and like Tauranga is a hub, and I don't know how many, I've heard of people sending their containers to the port of Tauranga. And they say it's increasing, but I don't know. That's only, you know, it came from a good source. But so really, with the IPO, you know, it's going to be interesting. You know, there's apparently a lot of, well, there is a lot of duplication in the ports, what they do. But I just see there's another thing there where Macron, the French, they got tired of suing the, you know, shipping companies, so they sued the captain, took him to court last week, £100,000 fine for the captain. The company will probably pay it, but, you know, excess emissions, you know, just letting something go in port. And so those are the things that, you know, when you're going to build your port, and if you go IPO, and to me it's the only way to go, because I've had a look through some of the previous shareholders, and I thought, well, no disrespect to them, but are they the right people to be running, basically on the board and running the company, having the, you need, in Tauranga, they skied about their throughput, their productivity, their safety record, and some talk that they're maybe one of the best in Australasia. So, you know, that's what you're up against. But there's a buyer for everything, but it just depends what the market will pay for the shares. You know, because I don't know what your return is on, you know, assets. I wouldn't have a clue. You know, but it'd be interesting. And the other thing is, you know, I've got the container amounts from 2017. And I've also got the AX turnover for yesterday, which was 5.5 billion, basically, and New Zealand was 124 million. And it's like that just about every day. So you look where we are on a global scale, and when the ships are coming here, the big ones, you know, they probably won't, the megas probably won't come to New Zealand. So it'll be the 8 to 13, 14,000 TEUs, more than likely. So is your wharf going to be able to handle those? You know, and I see Tauranga's got the 8 cranes, another one coming in 2020. So they're the busiest port in New Zealand. They put the most through. So, and we are sort of a bit of a, the draw is not huge. And then what's the predictions for forestry? Because there are a while there where they just didn't get planted. And it takes about 25 years for a pine forest to mature for cutting. So, you know, where's the growth? And then you've got water. You know, 1 million new trees going in apparently this year for apples or fruit. Well, you've got to have water. And that will be a problem for the bay. It is now. So, you know, there's all these things to consider, but, you know, I really think that it should be out in the marketplace. You know, you get a better, probably class of it, and I don't mean it disrespectfully, but more talented people coming in on the board and into the port and running it and growing it, because it needs, if it's going to go, that's the way it's got to go.
Thank you, Geoff.
Yeah, all right, that's it.
We really appreciate it. No, sorry, Alan, we don't have any time. Geoff took his whole 10 minutes. Thank you very much, Dave. We really appreciate you coming along and giving us your wisdom. Thank you, appreciate it.
Very good. It's a scrubber.
Then
it washes.
Oh, I know, mate. I'm on time. You've got those grapes sprayed already after all that rain?
Yes,
Right, Xan, you know that you've done this before. You've got 10 minutes, and if you want councillors to ask questions, you've got to use it within those 10. And whilst most people around this table know who you are, it's still a good idea to say, introduce yourself and say where you come from, how you fit in Hawke's Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yep, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Xan Harding. I'm a director of Hawke's Bay wine growers and involved in a bunch of different things around water and just various industry advocacy for a number of years. And I grow grapes near Bridge Park. So, and we did, our association was invited to meet with the chairman and the CEO early on in the consultation here to get an overview of the proposal. So we have had the benefit, in fact it was only me in the end, have had the benefit of that briefing plus looking at the public information. And just here to tell you that we support option B, we support the process and the result that the council's looking for. And we just wanted to, as well as deliver that message in person, and commend the council for the continued efforts to think sensibly and proactively about its investment portfolio. We just wanted to point out just give some advice along the way about to the council about some aspects that about that change in its investment portfolio that are not reflected in the public consultation. And it's just simple stuff about the fact that it's a very significant, or two main issues. One is that in the decision to pick a number in terms of a shareholding percentage, with the assumption that that is preserving you effective control over the organisation, I think that councillors need to think long and hard about what the right number is and what the right mechanisms are for ensuring that that's, if the desire of this group is for that to be a long-term control, then the mechanisms around that are clearly understood to avoid unintentional dilution and lack of proper control to the level that councillors want to agree on. And I'm not here to say to you that exactly what that answer is, but that it needs to be well considered and to have advice on that independent of the broker who is interested in selling as many shares and collecting as large a commission off you as possible for doing that. So that's one key theme. The other one is just to think along the way about the fact that you will have, assuming this goes ahead, have significantly restructured the nature of your long-term investment portfolio. And one of the benefits of having 100% ownership of the port is that it's a long-term asset, which is hard. It's illiquid. It's locked in. Just stating the obvious here. But the corollary of that is if you're intending to take some of that, if you still intend for the financial value of that to be preserved in the long term, then you need to consider your investment policies very carefully, and it's a really sensible and opportune time to relook at all those and just make sure, if you haven't already decided to do that, to review your investment policies, just to make sure that there's a clear clarity around decision making about how those funds invested and the degree of oversight and the separation of those from operating funds. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Xan. We'll start with Paul and then Tom.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Xan. When the Wine Growers Association made the decision to come up with option B, support option B.
Yep.
Did you as a group consider the risk of because the company would be the port would be partially privatised, that the port charges would increase so the shareholders got a reasonable return on capital?
Well, short answer, no, but I need to explain that. The first point is that at the moment, our industry is not a major user of the port. We certainly agree that it's a very important piece of infrastructure for the region, but we're not one of the primary users of it. So that's not that. Those questions are not the highest in our minds. But what is very important in our minds is the commerciality of this operation And one of the benefits of an IPO is you get the fullest discipline of the market looking at the business. And I think that's, I'm not sure that that's something that's been highlighted in the consultation documents, but I think it's a very, and certainly our overall, business-based approach to that is that those market disciplines will be more obvious, and there is a value to having those in going the IPO route. And if that means that costs have to go up for a sustainable business, while still that is, if our exporters, ultimately our users of the port, including ourselves, and we certainly expect and hope in the future to be bigger users of it, if we're having to pay what is a market return for the use of that asset, well, that's market reality. I don't think we should be concerned about that. Under the current proposal, you will still be the majority beneficiary of those increased returns, and you can do with them as you please for the benefit of the region.
Tom.
He answered my question.
Peter.
Hi, Xan. Thanks for coming in. Good to hear from you. Do you or the Wine Growers Association have a view about local ownership through an IPO or partial sell-down process?
Not something that we'd discussed. Again, it's something that you guys and girls could usefully take a bit of advice on. I think, it's the problem is you're dealing with an asset which is part of an international market. And so that's the frame that I'd be looking at it in, is that it doesn't operate, and this is not. You're making I think the key thing is to look at those linkages between the internationalisation of this business and the benefits and risks in having an international shareholder. My gut feel is you're actually better off not restricting that market, because you're not going to get proper market signals if you only have domestic shareholders. That's the question that I would test anyway.
But the countervail is that a lot of people here feel very strongly and emotionally attached to public ownership.
We've got another question.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, take that into account by all means, absolutely.
Yeah, or just briefly, Xan, given your connection with the export sector, do you think there would be a tolerance for rises in port charges to the export sector? What do you think the tolerance would be, given that they are at market prices now, for any delusional increase in those charges?
Well, look, I'm not familiar with whether the prices are at market. However, I'm not qualified to talk in detail about that pricing. And as I say, we're only marginal users of that service. To a certain extent, you have a captured market in here. I think, nobody in business likes their costs going up. They're never going to, the turkey's never going to vote for Christmas, are they? So again, it comes back to if it's a commercial return, and the fact is, if their costs are too high, then there's the question of the hidden costs and where they are at the moment. And if this port is not truly competitive, that needs to be resolved.
We have time for one more question. Just time, so thanks, Xan. It's really good. Thank you very much for taking time out of your work. Hello.
Thanks. I've got the spray done.
Yeah, you got the spray done, good. Gren, I nearly missed you back there, mate. I thought you deserted us.
Sorry?
I thought you deserted us. I didn't see
Feel
you.
like deserting, yeah?
Now, you're not up there yet, mate. Just.
Oh, yeah, I'll take all the time I can get. Okay, here we go.
No, Gren,
Yes?
just pause for a minute. So you've got 10 minutes, you know.
No, 15, I thought.
No, 10.
Special compensation for driving, what's a 100k drive to fit in with your
We had a guy come
agenda.
from Dannyburg, you know, we're using up time here, but we had a guy come from
No, we're not.
Dannyburg.
It's not my time yet.
No, it's not. Until I press that button, Greg.
Yeah. Hey.
Got 10 minutes. 10 minutes, and you have got, gives time to council if you want questions. Otherwise, take the whole time yourself if you want to hear from councillors. And whilst everyone here probably knows you, it's a good idea if you tell councillors who you are and what your role in Hawke's Bay.
That's in my 10 minutes?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, God.
So don't spend.
Here we go?
Okay, my hand is moving. Right, go, mate.
Okay, there's the submissions, and I've gone through a heap of them. Okay, who am I? Gren Cristie, live in Central Hawke's Bay. I've worked in the maritime industry for 20 years. This is about the size of our union agreements. So I'm well used to going through lots of bits of paper, and I know the ins and outs of shipping. Now, I've had a look through some of this. It seems to me that all you've done with your consultation is created confusion and woolly thinking. Look, we've got people in here who think the port belongs to Napier, so you haven't done your job there. But let's just start off with plan A, okay? When you look through that, people say, we want to keep the port because they understand 100% ownership is control. Now, you guys know that, and you've got to be bullshitting people if you're saying you don't know if you don't have that 100% ownership that you won't have control, because it comes down to that little piece of legislation which basically says a port must operate as a successful commercial enterprise. That is open to interpretation, but while you have 100% control and can replace directors at will, you can shape that to actually mean we look after our customers as well. You strip that out, put a private investor in there, the profit motive will dominate. And as I've put out there to everybody, Shane Jones, Air New Zealand, that demonstrates that clearly. So it is clearly not control, and people who have opted for A have gone, yes, we're doing this because we want to keep that control of our port. But they're saying, you know, we're prepared to swallow the rate increase. Now, that rate increase is just another whole lot of scare tactics you jokers have put out there, and I'm not happy about it at all. You had like 50 million left over from the dam sitting in term deposit up until a very short time ago. Now, here's this joker in the paper, and they're saying the other day, well, we have to deal with the loan, but, you know, so we've got to sell the port, but once that loan's off the books, the 80 million, you know, the port can self-fund. That's a bridging loan. Now, $50 million, which you had sitting in a term deposit, while we were paying interest on a loan of $86 million, is not a good situation. Now what you've done is you've given it to the financial sector to gamble with. Our best investment is to use that to pay off our debt. Over a certain length of time, that money can be fed back in and you can divert it wherever you like. But to start with, pay off that debt. So that leaves, what, about a 30 million debt. Spread that over the maximum length of time, and suddenly you're not scaring the ratepayers with a 53% increase in rates. That's scare tactics. All I see in your submissions, in your direction, is to corral people in a certain direction, which leads to privatisation of our port. You know, this privatisation, we've been through privatisation. We know it's been a bad thing for our country, but here we go again, our own bloody Roger Douglas moment, you know? The only guy who gets knighted for selling his country. Well, it was misplaced use of a sword as far as I'm concerned. You've got, you know, efficiencies. What a load of rubbish. Let's just move on, because I've only got short time here. No, you're going to cut me off, so I'm going to keep going. You're talking, you've got people saying, oh, we've got to own 49%. You know, we'll sell that off because we'll keep control. Okay, well, that's rubbish. We've already been through that as rubbish. That won't actually happen. You won't keep control. But you've got other people there go, hey, we want to get a chunk of the port. It's a great infrastructure. Well, without them actually digging into it, it's actually quite risky for what you are proposing. And then you've got other people there suggesting, we'll go for 49% because we can't afford the rate increase. Again, channeling people down that particular track. Now, one thing people have said through here repeatedly, why don't you go and see Mrs. Jones' little boy? He's got a big bag full of lollies to hand them out. Well, for a start, I very much doubt that they're going to hand out money to get rid of debt, which we carry. And I very much doubt that they're going to hand out money for basically building a deep water port for mega ships.
That is exactly what you're doing, and you have sown confusion again in the paper by saying it's not. When you dig in a channel to 14.5 metres, that is the depth for megaships. Straight away. That's what Tauranga has got, that is what Littleton is in the process of moving that about. This is what you're doing. So it's quite clear that's what's happening, but you're sowing confusion about those megaships. Now, there's serious people out there who say this can be a big mistake of overcapitalising, of setting the port up for megaships. You've got the past CEO of Freightways in 2016 saying this very thing. The cargo will be spread too thin across the country. The megaships, the big ships, are not interested in picking up, making short stops. They want to come in, and it's like that joke over there said before, they make their money when they're at steaming because they make a saving on fuel. There's going to be no savings for the megaships. Any savings they make through economies of scale, hey, nobody's going to see that in New Zealand. That's going in their back pocket. The only way we can bargain with those megaships is that if we have all our cargo, the bulk of our cargo sitting in one big heap, and then they're competing for that cargo. The thing is that you haven't told people about this whole sea change document out there where people put a lot of thought into this. I mean, you've got the New Zealand Shipping Council, that's got Fonterra and the Kiwi Freight Car, Zephyr, and heaps of other people saying, this is a stupid move, having too many megaships. This is not good. These are serious people. There was all sorts of submissions from the whole industry went into that sea change document, which the government is looking at dusting off. And you're going, oh, no. No, I don't want to be told by Wellington what to do. Well, they can't tell you what to do. It's up to us to make our decisions, but it is an option which you have not put out there amongst the public. So the public are going out there thinking, we have no choice. We have to expand. And what is that expansion? A port, a deep water port for megaships, which may be underutilised. By not putting that out in front of the public, people again are channeled into thinking, gee, this is our only option. What needs to be done is that needs to be examined in very clearly, and there needs to be a business case for that, and that is transshipping, and the coastal ships will get bigger because there's heaps of ships coming on getting sold cheap. Ships are being scrapped now less than 20 years old for these mega ships to come in. So it's the cost of transshipping versus the cost of servicing the capital you're going to put into that megaport, 350 million. Now, that's probably likely to go up. 2016, that wharf was 50 million. Now it's projected 143 million. Now that might be because you're building it stronger for mega ships than you weren't in the past. I don't really know. But these are the price projections, and once you start getting into those mega ships, bigger cranes, the whole infrastructure which feeds into the port has to be capable of bringing a huge amount of cargo in a short period of time. You've got congestion now, you're going to have a lot of congestion later, and you're going to have a lot of angry people around Napier because of that. And let's get on to congestion in the port while I'm throwing that all around. You've got heaps of logs in that port. Now, I don't know how many of those logs are stowed in that port simply because it's convenient for the logging outfits to stow it there until it gets shipped, or whether the port is just holding what it needs for those immediate ships. But if it's the earlier case, there is absolutely no reason why those logging companies can't find their own storage off-site and bring those ships in with a booking system, those logs in with a booking system, which applies equally to the apple producers, which basically the port had solved that problem until the hiccup with Wellington, and we've got a lot of Wellington cargo made that more difficult. Which brings us on to your circular argument that we've got to get rid of the port because we've got too many eggs in one basket, which is absolutely bloody stupid because the port has so many multi-strands of income, it is highly unlikely all of those will fall over at once. That's just unbelievable. And if they did, as the chief executive of the port suggested, well, look, I wouldn't be giving a damn about the bloody dividend. I'd be looking for a dry cave and two sticks to rub together because that's going to be the situation, you know. It's just silly, you know, and then it's earthquake. Well, earthquakes are always on the agenda. We had one 87 years ago, and the port slowed down briefly for that. The port in Napier was up and running within 10 days. Littleton, with the second earthquake, which really did the damage, 96 hours, and it had what was described by the chief executive an outstanding year. An outstanding financial year, because how anything that's going to damage the port to that extent is going to damage everything else. You need your bulk supplies, they come in across the wharf, ka-ching, 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 ka-ching. So, as far as I'm concerned, none of that stands up. It's all weak, weak, weak. Oh, I'm not really running out of here, but there's all sorts of things in the submissions here where I just go, people have not been exposed to all the information they should have. This is far too rushed. You guys have said, well, we've had 2 years, and you're woolly thinking about it. 1 minute you're wanting to contract out the port for 50 years. What a stupid idea is that? I had some young bloody manager down the port telling me, oh, these jokers... You want to hear the end of this sentence, though. It's worth it. He's telling me that, oh, no, these new guys coming in to lease the port. They don't want to change anything. They won't be hard on the workers. What a plonker. 50 years.
That's a paragraph. Thank you, Grenville.
We can ask some questions.
It didn't disappoint us. Well, it's worth staying for that. Thank you very much.
Don't worry, you'll read me in the paper. I wasn't here to talk to you, I was talking to the webcam.
Thanks, Gren. Sharleen.
But he might have stayed up there with you, Sharleen.
I'm not sure if that was a plus or a minus. The slower and not more considered, but the slower presentation.
Thank you, Sharleen.
And I'm reading mine.
So you were here to hear what I said to Gren, but 10 minutes, and if you want council to ask questions, they have to in 10 minutes. And it's quite nice if you tell councillors who you are and how you fit into all this, or they most of them know you, I think.
Exactly. So I'm Sharleen Baird from Central Hawke's Bay, and previously from Littleton Port, and always been a civic-minded person interested in all things affecting communities. So kia ora koutou, ngā mihi. I'm restating what I'd written in my submission, that I do believe this consultation was seriously flawed and can't be used with any certainty for HBRC to be confident that ratepayers had all the information required so we could make informed decisions on the best strategy to pursue in the immediate future. I now believe a referendum and a judicial review of this process are needed for the following reasons. The unreasonably short time frame. As Gren said, after councillors admitted they'd spent 2 years reading reports and canvassing options, they gave us ratepayers only 5 weeks to access our own information, read the potential options and strategies, as HBRC only released information on their 4 top picks. The limited number of options presented, I think the public weren't clearly informed they could ignore the 4 options and suggest others, and many submitters clearly didn't understand what was or wasn't allowed with sale of shares. Thinking they could dictate and control who or where shares went to. Local ownership definitely can't be guaranteed. Some had been scared into voting for part sale by the belief that their rates would rise unreasonably and to an unaffordable level because they were unaware of any other options. Submitters such as myself with alternative suggestions were lumped under other, rather than counted on what we were suggesting as alternatives. E.g., other has various options such as waiting for the national strategy before making a permanent decision, a longer repay period with part ratepayer, part user pay charges, which would alleviate the fears of the poorer ratepayers, or bond issue. The other things that I'm not happy about, the lack of transparency re all these potential options and whether you'd explore them fully. For example, one councillor stated they don't need to wait for central government's national transport strategy before making decisions, as the government has told you that you can just go for it after an HBRC delegation had talks with them. Well, if that's so, presumably minutes of that meeting were taken, So I'd like to see the written confirmation that Phil Tryford had actually said that. I want to know that you have sought government funding, and if you were rejected, share with us why you were rejected. We could maybe then campaign to central government for additional funding for things like this. I'm also concerned there has been misinformation and confusion from you councillors. I've read councillors in Port Company views stating we need the now more expensive upgrade from just a wharf expansion, which has grown to 145 million, to 350 million incorporating deep dredging, etc., to accommodate cruise and megaships. I've also read from a councillor, it's not for megaships. Complete contradiction. I also think that reports that you've relied on don't appear to have included legal responsibilities and issues relating to control when there are company part share sales of up to 45%. Many other submitters have accurately quoted Air New Zealand as an example of this, and the New Zealand Institute of Economic Research documents also highlight control issues. So I don't think you're up with the play if you really think you're going to have control by selling that. I took issue with the limited representation of stakeholders on your review board. Where was the opposing perspective from the 2 ex-National MPs and Jim Scotland, who stated ages ago that he wanted the port sold? And he also said, which I think is hilarious, we should buy the Napier to Wellington railway tracks. He didn't seem to be aware that we actually own them. So, you know, look at who you're getting your advice from. I do hope too that your current directors don't have any conflicts of interest and that they're not part of any entity who wishes to purchase shares. And the other thing that really pissed me off, no open group public meetings where ratepayers who wanted to could hear from other ratepayers' views and questions. Now, I think this is a reduced form of democracy and consultation that some councillors are starting to use, and some councils, on the grounds that some people feel too shy to speak up in a public meeting. I mean, I understand that, and one-on-one chats with staff are a great idea. But to be truly democratic and inclusive, you should still have held both types of gatherings on such an important issue. Because at those big open public meetings, that's where people hear other people's opinions and can spin off them or hear things that they didn't think of themselves. I'm also concerned that the written communication didn't reach all the households. Your email address given on our Port Our Options was incorrect. So, you know, there's all these limitations in this consultation process that I'm really not happy with. I'm now concerned about the method of assessing and giving weight to submissions, because we're going to be working through this, but, you know, it could be considered undemocratic and not accurately reflecting what the public want. My options, which were wait for central government lead and to retain 100% public ownership, have not been counted as part of option A, which is to retain ownership, because I disagreed with how and who should pay, and therefore may be discounted by HBRC staff as not adding to the many who want to retain 100% ownership. So we are going to look at how you're going to score that and how you're going to weight that in your final decision making. And then just my own thing, I agree with other submitters that issues such as earthquake risks, eggs in one basket, congestion, paying off debt, low returns, megaships can be managed and mitigated without selling our only valuable strategic asset we ratepayers own. And my last point, referendum at the next local body elections and a judicial review would at least give a more comprehensive overview and true democratic interest in all the issues. And this will definitely be a local body election issue next year, so think on that too.
Thanks, Sharleen. We do have time for one question.
Sharleen, you mentioned the email address was incorrect.
Yeah.
That wasn't something that had been brought to my attention before. So
I went to email and it didn't work.
Okay.
So then I had to go on the site and find that it was info at, but they'd left the info at off.
Okay.
So it got returned to me. The fail. By demon something or other.
We have time for another quick question.
There's a bribe.
Should be in a plain brown packet.
It's got to be open, mate.
Okay, thanks, Sharleen. Really appreciated your thoughts, even though they didn't quite sync with some of ours.
Sorry?
Even though they didn't quite agree with them all, but it was good that you came all this way and shared your thoughts with us.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
Well, there are some real issues there, real concerns about process, this process.
Thank you.
It's not, I think, well, I would say, yeah, it's almost as bad as the Ruataniwha process, but not quite.
Thank goodness for that. Okay, now we have a little bit of a gap. Is Sean Fredsburg here? Sean's not here.
No.
Anna, we could bring you on early if you like, if you're good for that.
Couple minutes possible.
Yeah, we're just going to have a bit of a stop for 2 minutes while Paul.
Cosy chair.
Good chair. You need to put your feet up if you like.
What do you think? Stay a bit longer.
So Anna, while Paul's out of the room, anyway, thanks for coming in. And as you've done this before, I guess, have you? 10 minutes? Used to be 5, but you extended to 10.
I don't think I've ever made a council submission.
No.
No.
Well, you have 10 minutes to give your submission, and within that 10 minutes, any questions that you want to allow councillors to question have to come within that 10 minutes.
Oh, if I ask a question?
No, your whole time is 10 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
So you can take up the whole time yourself,
My time.
your time, or you can it'll be short and councillors can ask you questions.
I'm sure you can ask me questions. Just give me a call.
We'll just wait for Paul to come back in. He was quite keen.
He's just gone to a smoke, isn't he?
Oh, is that?
I don't think we should wait for him. If he wants to have a smoke, he can do that.
Gone to the loo.
Is he?
Yeah.
Is he smoking in the loo?
But anyway, Anna, so everyone around this table knows you, but it is quite good if you talk about, introduce yourself and how you fit into the Hawke's Bay community. It's quite good.
Oh, okay.
Oh, 2 of them. Lovely. Okay.
Right.
The floor is yours.
My name's Anna Lorke, and I'm submitting as a ratepayer and business owner in Hawke's Bay. First of all, I'd just like to mention these names. Chris Tremaine, Rex Graham, Neil Curtin, Alistair MacLeod, Jim Scotland, David Shand. The review panel members, appointed by council, were chosen because they had a direct or related knowledge of the investment activities of council and/or collectively provided the required experience and skills to undertake the review. The panel, supported by the chief executives of the council, James Palmer, H. Brick, Blair O'Keefe and Port Gareth Cowie. Now, so that's the review panel that you appointed, and that's the review panel that you took advice from, or you were on and agreed with the advice that you were given. So, I just wanted to get to the conclusions of your report. Council should rule out an IPO. That's what the panel members agreed to. That's what you recommended to council. So you took nearly 2 years to come to the conclusion
that an IPO was not the right option for the Napier Port. I'm not quite sure how you changed your mind from March the 18th to where are we now? October, November, December. But you had time to change your mind. You thought that that was the right idea. And I just don't understand why you are now saying that it's the best deal in town when you yourselves, Neil, Rex, and who else was on the panel did I mention? You all decided it was the wrong thing to do. The reasons you gave, with the unless you're telling me that the panel wasn't worth employing or engaging, or that they would given you bad advice, including your own people on it were giving bad advice, then you've got here a listing of 250 million is required to enter the NZX 50. So of course we're not going to get near that. You then say that right down here that it's just not the right thing an IPO to do. So I just don't understand why you've changed your mind. And where was the debate on changing your mind? And now you're all sitting here and telling Hawke's Bay that it's the best thing in town. It just does not make sense. Now, I've looked at those 3,500 submissions, and you don't have a mandate to sell down to 49%. The submitters before me, have said, you know, it's confusing. You've even argued that you can't have a tick the box because it's too confusing. And then you're trying to tell me now that your one has got 57% support. But when you really start looking at those submissions, they don't fully support you selling down to 49%. So you don't have a mandate to sell more for a future fund. You cannot sell down to 49% unless you have a clear mandate to do so. You need to review our submissions in context, not just of the box ticked, but also of the submitters who expressed, even if they did support an IPO, that they did not agree with selling down to 49%. You do have a duty to take that into account. As part of this, I think you need to provide the community with a clear analysis of just how many submitters, regardless of how those shares were sold, supported either selling down to 33, 49 or 45%. You never sought feedback from Hawke's Bay on retaining 100% local ownership. You should have. You made out that the only way for Hawke's Bay to retain full ownership and control is through paying more rates. We know that's not correct. You could have made serious investigations into a Hawke's Bay consortium of local ownership. I've already mooted Unison. There are other Hawke's Bay investors, iwi, Central Lines, a consortium of exporters, mum and dad Hawke's Bay investors. But you haven't done that. Rex and James, I know you've dismissed genuine approaches from Unison. Unison is worth more than a cup of tea. You simply refuse? Do you simply refuse because you're hell-bent on this IPO now? I mean, surely you owe Hawke's Bay the opportunity to look at retaining 100% local ownership. If the regional council can't own it all 100%, then Hawke's Bay can. We can raise $86 million. This region is booming. We can do it. You need to let us have the opportunity to do so. Now, I really do hope you would stop being so precious and protective about justifying your great consultation process. I do want to bring to your attention that in Hastings alone, it received 3,000 submissions on the Opera House. That's that's just Hastings. We shouldn't just be patting yourselves, well, you shouldn't be patting yourselves on the back for 3,500 submissions on the port. To me, that's not a reflection of good consultation. You needed to get out more, engage and motivate with people. You can't have public workshops from 3 till 6 in the afternoon, when the majority of people are working, collecting kids from school, looking after children, and expect high turnouts. I mean, it's odd. I mean, I agree with the woman before. You didn't even have a public meeting after work hours. I mean, you say from 5 till 6, but most people are just finishing work and getting home. You've got to feed the kids. I mean, when are you meant to get out to have the meet, go and have a meeting? I find that really odd. And, I just don't think sending out the consultation document with the junk mail was a good idea. You might have been saying you wanted to get to every household. Well, look, there's a enrolment, the electoral roll. You've got a ratepayer roll. You could mix the two up. You could send us all a letter. It's not hard, but you didn't get to everybody. I just think that you could have embraced this so much better. You could have said, look, Hawke's Bay, we really want to take on board your ideas. We're not just going to play it by the book. We're not just going to give you 4 weeks after we've had 2 years, after we thought we were against an IPO and whoops, we just changed our minds and now we want an IPO. You could have said, look, we'll give you your 3 months. We'll take it to the vote. We'll make sure that each and every person really, truly gets the opportunity to have a fair and equal say. I know you think that having a referendum, Rex, is not a good idea. But it is the only fair and equal way for everybody to have their say. A referendum does engage people. It motivates voters. It gets people out, and that's good for democracy. Dictatorship has no place in the democracy of Hawke's Bay. We are a region who can do it. We don't need to sell our port to outside ownership. But I've got a feeling that given you guys seem to be so hell-bent on it, you're going to do it anyway. But if you do one thing. Protect the rest of that port. Protect it and ensure that if you go and sell any more of it, you can't do it without a people's vote. If you're going to sell more at any time in this regional council, that you must put it to the people before you sell a majority shareholding. Thanks.
Thank you, Anna. You certainly didn't disappoint us. Don't really have time for a question and an answer. So,
No, that's good. You can always talk to me on the phone.
All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate that you've been deeply involved in this and you've spent a lot of time and done all that research and it's good to have that you've done all that. Okay.
Always a good, robust time with the regional council.
Thanks, mate. See you. Okay. Has Sean arrived? No, he hasn't.
So when it says that Sean left a message, what does that mean?
We left a message for him confirming his attendance, so we haven't heard back.
What time's he due here?
So,
12:45.
5 minutes ago.
So he hasn't arrived, so we're going to break for lunch.
No show. Right, thank you.
So back at 2:10.
2 o'clock.
2 o'clock, it
2
says.
o'clock.
Hello, who's on for number 14? Is there anybody there's a gap here?
No, not at the moment. So
2:10.
We've got a couple of people who have got plenty more to say.
So 2:10, Adrian Williams.
People to listen.
No, well,
Mr. Chairman, what's the program? This one says we finish at 4:40.
Possibly confirming. I think we're still confirming those for later on in the day. So we'll give you your second page. We are planning to work through. Yeah.
Is there an evening session?
Yes.
Yes, there is.
Yeah.
Because we're not finishing at 4:40.
No, there's still an evening set. There's another page of these to come.
Yeah, right. I understand it, but I don't exasperate. I just heard someone say we're finishing at 4:40. I was just making sure that was not the impression everybody had, that we were finishing in the evening.
Pretty happy with this here.
okay, let's break for lunch. We should probably start gathering at 2 o'clock. But the first person is on at 2:10.
Sounds good. Yeah.